Support for Lab Out Loud is provided by the National Science Teachers Association. You can find out more at nsta.org. While you're there, take a look at NSTA's National Conference this spring from April 11th to the 14th in St. Louis. We hope to see you there. You're listening to the Lab Out Loud podcast, Science for the Classroom and Beyond. And today we're talking to a children's book author whose latest book is about Hedy Lamarr.
I really thought your name had to be Marie Curie if you wanted to be a scientist and a woman, because the only books about women scientists were about Marie Curie. So the reason I'm very excited about this book is it's showing kids that you don't have to choose. If you want to be glamorous, that's great. You can also be smart. The important part is seeing themselves in the story, seeing that they too could do something like this.
That's coming up next on Lab Out Loud, but first, I'm your co-host Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartel.
Today we welcome to the show Laurie Wallmark. She's had a history of different careers in the past, things like computer science, teaching computer science, and even opening an online bookstore before Amazon did it. But what we want to talk to Laurie about today is her work as a children's book author. Over the past few years, she has been writing picture book biographies that recognize women in STEM.
Okay, my first book was about Ada Lovelace, the world's first computer programmer, which of course fits into the fact that I used to be a programmer and I taught computer science. Then I wrote about Grace Hopper, who was the first person to use words like multiply and divide instead of ones and zeros in programs. So now anyone, including kids, can be a programmer. Again, sticking to what I knew, computer science. And then I started to spread out a little bit.
Laurie's latest book is Hedy Lamarr's Double Life.
I'm very excited about that book because in addition to showing the amazing achievements that she did, Hedy Lamarr co-invented the technology that helps prevent our electronic devices from being hacked. But she was also a glamorous actress, and that's what she's known for. She was known as the most beautiful woman in the world. That was her trademark, if you will. She had been a stage actress back in Europe, but when she came over here, it was strictly as a movie actress. Back then, when you had a contract with a studio, it was a long-term contract, and they wouldn't let you do other things. So she did films. The famous one was Samson and Delilah. That seems to be the film that most people know of hers.
In addition to acting, Hedy was very active and very patriotic. She did many things to support the U.S. during the war.
She sold war bonds and entertained the troops. She would go to canteens and dance with the soldiers and sailors. She just, every Friday, there she was dancing at the local canteen with the soldiers and sailors. So it meant so much to her. And she raised an incredible amount of money by selling war bonds because she was this glamorous actress. Who wouldn't want to buy a war bond from the glamorous actress?
Earlier in Hedy's life, she was living in Europe, married to an arms dealer. That put her in a position to overhear some very interesting conversations from all sorts of people.
And this arms merchant would have Nazis coming and talking about arms at the dinner table. And because she was a woman, no one really paid attention to her. She was just there. But she listened, and she learned that one of the problems was you would send off a missile from a boat, use a radio signal to guide it, and someone could intercept that signal, send the missile off course, and it wouldn't hit the target. So she learned that way back when she was in Europe at the dinner table overhearing.
This problem swirled around in Hedy's mind for years, until she thought of a solution.
She thought, I'm going to find a partner to help me solve this problem. And that's when she met up with George Antheil. She met him at a dinner party. He was interested in inventing also, but he was also known as a musician. And he wrote a composition for multiple player pianos at the same time. And in talking about ways to solve the missile problem, Hedy had the idea. She thought about those player pianos and how you play them at the same time and they sort of coordinate with each other. Well, if I play this note, then the other piano knows to play this note. I play that note, the other piano knows to play that note. And she thought, what if I keep switching notes all of the time, as long as the other piano knows what note to play, no one can figure out the message between my piano and the other one. And that's what gave her the idea. She called it the hopping of frequencies. You go from peak to peak to peak of a radio wave. So if you switch the frequency, it's much harder to hack into it. Your Wi-Fi connections, your cell phone connections, GPS. Think about the GPS signal coming from satellites. What if someone could intercept those and change them? Then forget that people would get lost, our military would get lost, it would be chaos.
I think one of the lessons that I always come back to with Hedy Lamarr is shattering that misconception of the scientist and, you know, the stereotypical white coat.
Right.
I taught a STEM course this summer for summer school, and I had younger kids than I thought I would. And so my wife, the expert kindergarten teacher she is, suggested that I invest in maybe some picture books that I could use to help fill the time and tell some of those stories as well. And so
I like your wife a lot.
Yeah, as well. I do too. And she didn't like my Amazon account after that, but we found quite a few books there. And yes, Ada Lovelace was one of them. I had fun kind of like looking through some of these books, and the kids really liked them as well.
Yeah,
and
I filled in and read one of them. I filled in for you and read one of the books, but I can't remember which one I read.
It was, I think I tried to do it. We did a couple on the Apollo 11 mission. I know I tried to do some of that because that was right about that time that, you know, there was some press coming out for the anniversary. But in any case, the kids really enjoyed that. But I think it's important for students to start to see themselves in these heroes. And we definitely have to, of course, have women in science. We have to have other diversity in science as well. And so that was it was kind of fun to look for some of those. And now I have a few more titles that I can add.
When I was a child, I really thought your name had to be Marie Curie if you wanted to be a scientist and a woman, because the only books about women scientists were about Marie Curie.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly that's not the case. But I want to get back to your talking about kindergartners. Even though my first two books, I say, are K through 5, that's what the publisher says, I read them to 3, 4, 5-year-olds. They get it. Mm-hmm. They understand it. They want to hear the story over and over again. They may not totally get the math or science behind it, but that's almost not as important at that age. The important part is, as you said, seeing themselves in the story, seeing that they too could do something like this.
I like the Hedy Lamarr story because it also is a good example of learning coming out from a connection to what she already knew, a connection to something that was already interesting her. And,
exactly.
That's something that we strive. It's difficult sometimes because you got to do it for 30 different kids, but to try to make connections to things that are important in their lives, in a child's life, and kind of see that growth. But that's a great example of here's someone who took something that was, it was interesting to her and, kind of cross-pollinated.
And important to her.
Yeah. What I always heard the story was like more of a discovery. Like she was, working with, I forget the other guy's name, but working on the piano, and then had that, knew about the earlier story and had this like eureka moment. I
think that probably is the case, that they take breaks from their inventing and they play piano. And one would play a tune, the other would copy the tune. And I think that's really what gave her the idea, is that she's changing notes and he's changing notes to match.
Mm-hmm.
And those changing notes made her think of changing frequency.
So how did she get it from idea to invention to it being used by the military?
Well, the two Invention, a lot of that was her partner, George Antile, because he had more of the engineering background.
A former weapons inspector, it says in your book.
Exactly.
And then a composer of modern music.
So that's a little bit of who you know.
That's quite of a shift. Yeah.
People who do more things than one.
Yeah, no kidding.
So she came up with the idea, but then it's not like she just said, oh, I have this idea, go off and run with it.
Yeah.
They really worked together as a partnership, getting the idea, putting it together, putting the patent together, submitting the patent, and then giving it to the Navy. Once again, very patriotic, wanted to help win the war. Gave it to the Navy. This was great. The Navy took the idea, looked at it, whether they thought it was too expensive or would take too long to implement right at that point in time. It's hard to tell. But they slapped top secret on it, and then no one could do anything with it. Mm-hmm. That's the real shame in this story, that for all those years, no one could do anything with it because it was top secret.
So she didn't get credit for it until, mostly in the modern era here.
Right. Well, because any of these war secrets, it's like code breaking and any of these things that people did during the war, it was top secret. You couldn't talk about it and you couldn't do anything with it. But then when it went off patent, electronics companies saw the value immediately and they all rushed to use it. Mm-hmm. But of course, she got no money from it because it was no longer under patent.
Yeah.
Was she able to see it being used, though? I mean, was she able to see, get a sense of pride of it being used?
I think so. Okay. Certainly not the way we know it's used now.
Sure.
But it definitely had started to be used. And she received that award from the Electronic Frontier Foundation for her contributions to computing. So clearly, at that point, even though she was getting on in years and pretty much housebound, her comment and the last line of the book is, it's about time. Because it was about time that people recognized this amazing contribution. Would someone else have invented it by now? Probably. But all those years it was top secret. No one else did.
When you're writing these books and you've painted this picture of Hedy Lamarr's life, there doesn't seem to be as much like trials and tribulations that we sometimes associate with women in science. Is there a hidden story there, or?
For her, there really wasn't as much because she was not trying to get a university education, forbidden to women in Europe for many years. She wasn't trying to get a teaching position. She wasn't trying to work in industry. Because she was working by herself, she didn't have those same kind of hindrances. And it probably didn't hurt that she had a male partner in this enterprise. If she had tried to do it all by herself, if she had been able to, I'm not sure she would have gotten as far.
Where are we now? What are your thoughts on, obviously there's been progression since the time when she was working on this, but we know that there is still work to do. Can you speak about that?
I certainly can. You may regret asking this question.
No.
Let's talk about women in computing, because that's my field.
Okay.
Both of my daughters happen to be software engineers. And when they were in college, they would say, there are fewer women now than there were in my time when I graduated college way back when. And I sort of didn't believe them because that's ridiculous. How could that be? Well, it's true. There were more women in computing when I graduated college back in '76 than there are now. I used to think...
I would have not thought that either.
I used to think incorrectly, as it turns out. I thought I had the reason. And the reason I had was when I graduated, there were very few computer science departments. I took my computer courses in the electrical engineering department.
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't have to major in computer science. I majored in biochemistry, or you majored in math or biology or what have you. And then you learned computing. So I thought maybe women didn't want to major in computer science. Apparently that is not the reason, even though I thought it was a pretty good reason. The reason is more that, in general, boys are socialized earlier on computers. So they are using computers, they're programming computers earlier. And then, of course, then once you get to college, you have much more knowledge. It's more familiar. It's an easier thing to get into. But it can change. There is a woman, she's president of Harvey Mudd College, which is an engineering school out west. And when she became president, the number of women in computer science was, I'm going to say 36%. It's about that. That might not be the exact correct number. The number who major now is 51%. So clearly, there is a way to encourage more women and other underrepresented minorities to enter scientific fields. We just have to do it. End of soapbox. End of soapbox there.
Mm-hmm. The thing is, this has been something that's been present my entire career as a teacher. I remember I worked at a science outreach program at the university when I was still finishing up my degree. And we had a science outreach. And then we also, during that time when I was there, we had a Women in Science initiative at a department that was working on that. So it's always been something on my radar for, we're talking 20 to 25 years now. And I feel like sometimes I'm still hearing the same things. Like, it makes me think like, okay, what are we, is it just is this just how long change takes? Or is there something we're not doing yet?
I would like to believe that part of what will help is this current generation of children growing up. Mm-hmm. I teach Hour of Code workshops, just like many schools around the country do. So I see elementary school age kids come in, and the boys in general, again, oh, I know how to do this. I can do this. I know how to do that. And already by second, third, fourth grade, the girls are holding back and not as confident. And I'm not a teacher, so I really don't have a solution to that. But I think confidence really is a big part of it, which brings us back to old Hedy, that showing that it's okay to be smart. It's okay to be interested in science. And it's okay also to try things and fail. In my Ada Lovelace book, she wanted to build a flying machine. Clearly she failed. We're talking the 1800s. But she tried. And I think that's another important lesson that our children can learn through books, is trying things.
And the fact that, I mean, Hedy can be a role model. And you mentioned Hour of Code. In their videos, they certainly showcase people with similar qualities that are excellent role models. And I think your work, your book, and everything is doing that, is providing students with role models to kind of see those messages.
Right, and that's why I write about women in STEM.
So, any future people that you're looking at, future women?
Sure.
Any past women that you're going to write about in the future?
Future dead woman.
Brian's looking for a sneak peek here. Come on.
Next year, I have a book coming out called Numbers in Motion, Sophie Kovalevsky, mathematician. Okay. And her math had to do with the mathematics of rotating solid bodies, like planets, footballs, or tops, which makes it a little bit easier to explain in a picture book. because it has a very
Yeah.
concrete image that you can get.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, one thing we didn't talk about is the illustrations in the book. They are beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. Now, Katie Wu did a wonderful job again.
And, not the easiest. The tops in the football sound like they will be easier to, like you said, they're objects, but the frequencies, that's not the easiest thing to draw or get across, visualize.
I actually sketched those out, and then she made it pretty.
Awesome. That's awesome. Excellent.
With my very limited artistic ability, my boats looked like little sailboats, and then I had the waveforms. So any of the frequency things I sketched out for her to be able to pretty up.
Oh, that worked well. Awesome.
Right.
Well, it works. The outcome is beautiful, and I enjoyed reading the book, and I hope that all of our listeners get a chance to check it out as well. It's a fabulous read for young and for old, and it does a fantastic job bringing a life of a very important woman into our kind of consciousness.
Well, that was my hope.
Thanks so much for talking to us, Laurie.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure. Looking at a little icon of my own face on the computer screen this entire time.
If you'd like to learn more about today's episode, head on over to our website, laboutloud.com, for more information. You can also find details about all the previous episodes, and you can leave us feedback and comments. We want to hear from you.
If you enjoyed the show, make sure you've subscribed on iTunes, Google Play Music, or your favorite podcasting platform. And if you really enjoyed it, consider leaving us a rating or a review. Your feedback helps others find our show.
If you like Lab Out Loud and you love the show that we provide for you, please consider supporting the show at our Patreon page. Head on over to patreon.com/laboutloud for more information. Until next time, I'm Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartell.